If you ever really look at those official photos from global diplomatic summits, there's just a fascinating psychological dynamic playing out right in front of
Oh
us.
yeah, the body language is always so telling.
Right. Because you have the leaders of the world's biggest geopolitical rivals, and they're standing shoulder to shoulder, the cameras are flashing, the red carpets are, perfectly vacuumed, and everyone is smiling.
They have to smile. It's part of the job.
Exactly. But if you look past the teeth and the firm handshakes and you just look at their eyes, you see something entirely different.
It's completely cold. I mean, it is the ultimate diplomatic performance.
Yeah.
The smiles are strictly for the evening news cycle back home, right? But the eyes reveal the actual calculus happening in the room. I mean, they are standing right next to the person they are actively trying to outmaneuver for basically global supremacy.
It's intense, and today we are taking a deep dive into some incredibly sharp, highly analytical commentary that pulls the curtain entirely back on what is hiding behind those forced smiles.
And it is a lot.
It really is. Now, the analysis we are digging into today is highly opinionated regarding the current U.S.-China dynamic. And just to set the ground rules for us and for you listening at home, we aren't taking any political sides here.
Right, definitely not.
Our goal is simply to impartially unpack the fascinating architecture of this argument, just so you can understand the broader picture being painted about global power right now.
And the core of that argument,
Mm-hmm.
it fundamentally reframes how we should be looking at superpower conflict altogether.
How so?
Well, we're all conditioned by movies and history books to think of global conflict as a traditional military standoff, like troops on a border, aircraft carriers in a bay, that sort of thing.
Right, the classic Cold War imagery.
Exactly. But the argument here is that the real war for the next century is a quiet, calculated struggle. It's not being fought with missiles. It's being fought with factories, with these invisible global supply chains, and with staggering amounts of sovereign debt.
It is the cold reality that behind all that pageantry, only one superpower can actually set the rules for the next century.
Yeah.
And to understand how this invisible war operates, we're going to look really closely at President Trump's recent visit to Beijing to meet with Xi Jinping, because the optics of this visit and the massive contradictions embedded in it, they serve as the perfect microcosm for everything we are talking about today.
The stakes for a meeting like this, I mean, they could literally not be higher. You have an agenda that includes Iran, global trade, Taiwan, nuclear issues, and artificial intelligence.
Just a light afternoon chat.
Right, just solving all the world's problems before lunch. But the public posture leading up to the summit is where the strategy really begins to reveal itself.
Oh, look at the absolute contradiction here. I mean, Trump arrives in Beijing, and his entire public stance, broadcast to the entire world, is, quote, "I don't need Xi's help on Iran."
Which is quite a statement to make right as you land.
Right, but he just flew thousands of miles across the globe to sit down and discuss it. It's like calling your ex at 2 a.m. just to say, "Hey, I don't miss you. I just wanted to confirm your number still works."
That is exactly what it's like.
Why make the trip? Why put yourself on their home turf if you hold all the cards?
Well, it's a transparent display of leverage, right? Or perhaps the lack thereof. The commentary uses this great analogy. It's like walking into a bank with absolutely empty pockets and telling the loan officer, "Hey, I don't need a loan. I'm just here to test the structural integrity of your lobby chairs."
Yes, I loved that line, just testing the chairs.
Right. It reveals a fundamental clash of diplomatic styles and, more importantly, a clash of what each leader actually needs out of the interaction.
So let's break down those different playbooks, because you really do have two totally different strategies colliding on that red carpet.
Very different.
On one side, you have Trump. His political brand is built entirely on the perception of victory, strength, and domination.
That's his whole thing.
Yeah. He operates in this highly reactive environment where he needs speeches, he needs social media dominance, and most crucially, he has an absolute need for an immediate victorious headline to take back home to his domestic base.
Contrast that mechanism with Xi Jinping's approach.
Yeah.
I mean, Xi is operating on a completely different timeline. He brings silence. He brings patience.
Yeah. What did the analysis call it?
5,000 years of strategic waiting.
Wow. 5,000 years of strategic waiting.
Yeah. Because Xi does not need to win the evening news cycle in the United States.
Yeah.
He doesn't clap early, and he doesn't blink first. He basically just sits across the table, takes notes, and lets the other side expend their energy trying to force a headline.
And when you put those two mechanisms in the exact same room, like a leader desperate for a headline today and a leader who measures strategic success in decades, you get this brilliant diplomatic maneuver called the no-deal deal.
Ah, yes, the no-deal deal. It really is a masterclass in modern statecraft. It is essentially the art of spinning absolutely nothing into a monumental victory.
It's kind of hilarious when you think about the mechanics of it.
It is. Think about what actually happens. The American delegation walks in, demanding concessions on Iran, demanding oil prices drop, demanding trade barriers fall. He just politely listens.
He just nods along.
Nods along, offers some vague assurances about continuing a constructive dialogue, and concedes absolutely nothing of substance.
So what do you do if you are the American president and you desperately need that headline for the folks back home?
You just rebrand the failure.
Exactly. A total lack of progress suddenly gets packaged for the press as a, quote, strategic pause. Or honestly, my personal favorite phrasing for this phenomenon from the source material phase 1 of invisible progress.
Invisible progress. It's just so good.
It really is. You walk into the room promising thunder, you walk out with nothing but fog, and then you stand at a podium and tell the world that fog is actually just thunder in a liquid form.
Liquid thunder. I mean, you can't make it up. And the crazy thing is, it works.
Wait, it actually works.
Yeah, because the financial markets and the domestic political base often just need the illusion of stability. By agreeing to a no-deal deal, Xi gives the U.S. delegation exactly what they need, which is a photo op and a talking point, while China gives up zero strategic ground.
But this raises a really critical question about leverage for me. Why is China able to just sit back, smile politely, and wait out the American pressure?
That's the core question.
Right. Why don't they feel the same intense pressure to scramble for a diplomatic win?
To understand that, we really have to look past the press conferences and examine the underlying economic engines of both nations.
Okay, let's do that.
So this requires us to fundamentally rethink the definition of what actually makes a global superpower today. For the last 70 years, the model of global power was defined by military alliances and military footprint.
Like, how many bases do you have? How many treaties have you signed?
Exactly. But that model is shifting. The new model of power is defined by trade dependence. The analysis argues that a true, modern superpower needs 3 specific ingredients to effectively wield influence:
Okay, what are they?
a massive economy, a highly productive population, and this is the really crucial one, no baggage.
Baggage. So when I think of Team America, I think of, like, unrivaled kinetic power. I think of carrier strike groups and stealth bombers. I definitely don't immediately think of the word baggage.
But baggage is exactly what constrains all that kinetic power. Team America has immense military might, sure, but it carries a staggering load of dependence.
Okay, define dependence in this context.
Think about the geopolitical architecture the U.S. has built since World War II. It relies on extremely expensive allies, like Europe, Britain, Israel, who historically depend heavily on the U.S. for financial support, military protection, or political cover.
Right.
America isn't just funding its own security, it's carrying a long line of partners who expect the U.S. to basically underwrite global stability.
And the mechanism behind underwriting all that global stability is, quite frankly, debt.
Exactly. Staggering amounts of debt. America is attempting to maintain this massive global posture while carrying a national debt that was reported at $38.91 trillion as of May 2026.
Let's actually pause on that number for a second, because we hear the word trillions thrown around so often it just loses all meaning.
It does. It sounds fake.
Yeah. So how does $38.91 trillion in debt actually function as baggage in a real geopolitical rivalry?
It acts as a massive anchor on your maneuverability. When your national debt reaches that level, the sheer cost of simply paying the interest on that debt becomes one of the largest line items in your entire federal budget.
Just the interest.
Just the interest.
Yeah.
It starts to rival or even exceed what you spend on actual defense. So every time a new global crisis flares up, whether it's in Eastern Europe, the Middle East, or the Pacific, the U.S. has to borrow more money.
And often borrowing it from global adversaries, right?
Exactly. They have to borrow just to deploy the military to manage the crisis. Every empire in history, eventually it's a breaking point where they have to ask if they can realistically keep paying for their military, their allies, and their domestic promises all simultaneously.
So, if that is the mechanism constraining Team America, this unrivaled military might weighed down by trillions in debt and a sprawling network of dependents. How does Team China operate differently in this framework?
Well, Team China builds its global leverage without the ideological demands and the heavy military underwriting.
What do you mean?
When the U.S. enters a region, it often comes with a list of demands. You have to adopt democratic norms, align with our military goals, host our bases. China doesn't do that at all.
They just show up with a checkbook.
Pretty much. They walk into a developing nation, and they really don't care about the local political system. They offer to build a highway, finance a deep-water port, or modernize a telecommunications grid, usually in exchange for raw minerals.
So their primary allies are not military partners.
Nope. Their allies are global supply chains.
There is a concept from the commentary here that really distills the difference, and it's stuck with me. It says, America sells weapons, China sells everything.
And the leverage difference between those two things is profound.
Right, because let's think about how that practically applies. A developing nation might scrape together the budget to buy a fleet of American fighter jets, once every 20 years?
If that.
Yeah, but they absolutely rely on Chinese solar panels, construction machinery, and cheap consumer electronics every single day.
Every day. If you anger the United States, you might lose access to high-end military hardware.
Ah,
But if you anger China, your power grid stops expanding, your construction sector stalls, and your middle class can't afford basic household goods.
wow.
China integrates itself into a country's daily survival, while America integrates itself into their hypothetical military contingencies.
Okay, hold on. Let me jump in here because this is where the logic usually gets challenged by skeptics.
Go for it.
I understand the power of selling everything.
Hmm.
But if China is the factory of the world, they still need someone to buy all those goods, right? If American giants like Walmart, Amazon, or Tesla pull their orders tomorrow, doesn't the Chinese economy just crater? Aren't they fundamentally dependent on the American consumer?
That is the conventional wisdom,
Yeah.
for sure. But when you look at the actual data, the mechanics of global trade have shifted dramatically to insulate China from exactly that scenario.
Really? How so?
Let's look at the numbers. In 2025, U.S. goods imports from China were about $308.4 billion.
Okay, $308 billion. That is a massive amount of money.
It is. But China's total global trade for goods that same year was an astronomical $6.5 trillion.
Wait, $308 billion out of $6.5 trillion.
Yes.
Okay, that fundamentally changes the math.
It really does.
Right.
America is an important market, sure, but it is no longer the singular pillar holding up the Chinese economy. For the past decade, through initiatives like the Belt and Road, China has systematically built alternative markets across Africa, Latin America, and Southeast Asia.
So they've diversified their customers.
Intentionally. They have systematically reduced their dependence on any single buyer. So, if the U.S. consumer stops buying tomorrow, China definitely feels the pain. But the American shelves, from critical pharmaceuticals to basic auto parts to everyday electronics, would empty out almost immediately.
The leverage is completely asymmetrical.
Exactly.
Which brings us to a really tense dynamic. You have America's military footprint carrying the massive financial weight of its allies, facing off against China's deep, unavoidable economic integration into the daily lives of the globe.
And this entire theoretical framework gets incredibly real when a massive geopolitical wildcard enters the chat.
Namely, Iran.
Yes, Iran is the perfect real-time case study to watch these two different superpower strategies literally collide.
Let's talk about Iran then. Geopolitically, Iran is not just a nation on a map. It acts as a valve on the entire global economy.
A very sensitive valve. It controls major global oil movement choke points, most specifically the Strait of Hormuz, and projects deep influence over maritime routes near the Red Sea.
And oil is the oxygen for the modern industrial world. I mean, we like to talk about tech and AI all day, but physical factories cannot run without oil. Cargo ships cannot move without it.
Which is exactly why China monitors the situation with Iran so intensely. China's interest in Iran is purely strategic. It's about
Here.
securing that industrial oxygen.
Right.
While America's strategy focuses on projecting energy dominance and physically controlling the sea lanes with aircraft carriers, China's strategy is entirely built around preparing for energy disruption.
And they are executing that strategy with staggering speed. Look at the data from the sources. In 2025, China added an average of 1.1 million barrels of crude oil per day to its strategic reserves.
Per day. Let that sink in.
It's unbelievable. And by December of that year, they had amassed nearly 1.4 billion barrels in reserve.
Now let's unpack the mechanism behind that 1.4 billion barrels, because it fundamentally alters the global balance of power.
What does that number actually mean in practice?
It means China is systematically decoupling its vulnerability from the U.S. Navy. If a conflict breaks out in the Middle East, or if the U.S. Navy attempts to blockade the Strait of Malacca to starve China of fuel, China doesn't have to immediately escalate to a nuclear or military confrontation.
Because they have 1.4 billion barrels sitting underground.
Exactly. They can run their factories, power their cities, and keep their supply chains moving for months, maybe even a year, without a single new drop of imported oil.
They are stockpiling for the blockade.
They are stockpiling for the global panic.
Which feeds directly into what the analysis identifies as China's ultimate strategy here: war by waiting.
Precisely. War by waiting. They do not want to meet America on a battlefield in some dramatic Hollywood-style naval clash in the Pacific. They want America to defeat itself through exhaustion.
Because if America keeps borrowing trillions of dollars to police the Middle East, fighting endless asymmetrical crises and carrying the financial burden of all its allies, China doesn't need to fire a single shot.
No, it just needs to let America drain its own treasury.
That dynamic with Iran really highlights the absurdity of the diplomatic posturing we talked about earlier.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
The commentary uses this brilliant image. Iran is watching the U.S. and China posture like a man watching two neighbors scream at each other over a property line while he quietly builds a brand new gate in the back fence.
That's such a good way to picture it.
Iran knows the U.S. is under massive domestic pressure regarding inflation and gas prices. China knows it. Russia knows it. The global oil markets know it.
The only person pretending there is no pressure is the American president standing on the red carpet in Beijing, claiming he doesn't need any help. It goes back to that Trump quote about not needing Xi's help with Iran. Claiming you don't need help when the entire global economy knows you are stretched, completely thin. It's like a pilot coming over the intercom and saying, folks, we don't need the runway today. We have confidence.
And confidence is not landing gear.
No, it is
You
not.
cannot land an economy on a campaign slogan. If the U.S. gets bogged down in another prolonged trillion-dollar confrontation regarding Iran, China benefits quietly and immensely.
Because every dollar America spends on weapons, every ounce of political capital it burns managing its allies, is a moment China uses to build another trade link in Latin America or fill another oil tank in a strategic reserve.
It is victory by extreme patience. It is power by silence.
You know, when you lay it out like that, it's easy to hear about strategic oil reserves, $38 trillion in debt, and global choke points, and just think of it as high-level political theater that only happens in rooms we'll never see.
Sure.
But the reality is you are participating in this exact tug of war every single day.
Absolutely. This isn't just abstract theory.
No.
When you read a headline about a new round of tariffs, you are seeing the U.S. try to violently decouple from Chinese leverage. When you buy a basic household item that traces its supply chain back to a factory in Shenzhen, you are interacting with China's strategy of global dependence.
And when you feel the pinch paying at the gas pump because a shipping lane in the Middle East is blocked, you are feeling the immediate ripples of this silent war over resources.
The United States is constantly fighting for a quick win, a headline, to prove to its domestic base and its allies that it is still the undisputed boss of the current world order.
While China, meanwhile, is perfectly content to just supply the world's daily lives and quietly, methodically rewrite the rules of the board for the next century.
It fundamentally boils down to a competition between a nation that built a world of military bases and a nation that built a world of supply chains.
And historically, supply chains outlast bases, because people will always need to buy things long after they stop needing to be protected from a hypothetical enemy.
That's a powerful way to look at it.
Which leaves us with a really provocative thought to chew on as we wrap up. If this analysis is correct, and this new era of superpower rivalry is won simply by waiting, by stockpiling resources, and by deeply embedding into global supply chains, what does the end of this conflict actually look like?
That's the million-dollar question.
We are so conditioned to expect a dramatic conclusion. But will the ultimate collapse of the losing superpower even be a dramatic event?
Maybe not.
Or will it look less like a formal surrender signed on the deck of a battleship and more like a slow, unnoticed transition? A reality where one day their currency, their diplomatic demands, and their cultural influence simply become, well, irrelevant to the rest of the globe.
It is a really sobering way to view the future. a slow exhaustion. The global order changing not with a catastrophic bang, but with a quiet, imperceptible shift in the supply chain routing.
Yeah, so the next time you see those official photos on the news from the latest diplomatic summit, the vacuumed red carpets,
Yeah.
the firm handshakes, the bright, practiced smiles,
Look at the eyes.
just remember what is actually happening just out of frame. When those two giants are smiling for the cameras, they are smiling at a partner. They are smiling at someone they are quietly, methodically trying to outlast. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.